Well, it is here. The summer movie season has now officially begun. The first true major blockbuster has been released, and that, of course, this year is Iron Man 3, which also marks the start of Marvel's Phase 2, which really doesn't mean much. I.e., they did Avengers, they planned everything up to that point, and then probably about the time of Avengers, they started trying to make plans for the next ones. Don't know if that really means much. However, this film, it's a pretty good start to our official movie season. It's fun. It's a fun, enjoyable film. Pretty good action. It does, of course, have its flaws. Not gonna lie there. But overall, it's an enjoyable film. I have some issues with it. I'll get into in a little bit, but it still didn't detract from me liking it. How I would rate it compared to the other Iron Man movies, I would put this on the bottom. For me, it is kind of an arc. I think the first Iron Man is still the best. The second one is in the middle, and this one is probably the weakest of the three. That's my opinion. I have seen other people online saying that this is their favorite. So there's some variation. It's not that it's bad. I think I just like Favreau's direction on this on the previous two a little bit better. So, without further ado, let's get into the more details. I'm going to try to keep it spoiler free for as long as possible, and then once we get into the spoiler territory, I will give a formal warning. Just so you all know. I don't want to hear the complaints. Getting into the film, I think we all know the plot. It's Tony Stark. There's a terrorist named the Mandarin who is detonating bombs throughout the country, blowing shit up. Voila. This is actually something they've been hinting at and what fans have been wanting for a while. Ever since the first movie, they had the Ten Rings. The Mandarin in the comics is basically considered Tony Stark's greatest, his arch nemesis. And so fans have been wanting this from the get-go. A lot of fans wanted to see the Mandarin in the first film, but they were holding him off, and they revealed his organization, and then there was a slight hint in that the one guy that sold the bad guy in Iron Man 2 the passport was supposedly a member of the Ten Rings, but they were promising if we got to a third movie we'd have the Mandarin. And we got him, I guess. I'll get into that in a second. But overall, let me get into some of the major points. The direction by Shane Black, who I'm rather impressed. If you're not familiar with Shane Black is mostly known for his writing. Directorial-wise, this is only his second film, I believe. Double check IMDb here, but he's only directed, I think, was it Kiss Kiss Bang Bang? Was that it? Double check. Yeah, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. And then there's this, and then he's got another film in development. So there's only 3 onto his credits. So you think, well, how did a guy like this get this thing? What he's known for is being a writer, and he did write this as well. And he wrote, of course, Lethal Weapon, Lethal Weapon 2, Lethal Weapon 3, Lethal Weapon 4. I'm sure he kind of regrets the last one. I don't know. I like the 4th one. A lot of people didn't. He wrote also The Long Kiss Goodnight, Last Action Hero, The Last Boy Scout, Monster Squad, if any of you guys remember that one. And it seemed like he took a bit of a break there. He did Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, wrote another short movie, AWOL. Last 2 not as well known, I think, as his rest, but he's got the action credentials, and they got some people excited. However, there's an element of his writing. He always sets his films around Christmas time. And I don't know, I'm not feeling the vibe here. The Christmas stuff seems like a distraction. It doesn't really bring an element to it. And here's the problem with it. When it comes to Christmas stuff, you're into seeing Christmas themed stuff around Christmas time, but we get so over inundated with the holiday bullshit that by the time when we're not in Christmas, we just don't want to deal with it. I kind of think that it would have been better off if they had played this, if they'd switched release dates with Thor and Iron Man 2. I think those two, considering this tone, would have been maybe a little bit better. Because Thor 2, sorry, I meant Iron Man 3 and Thor 2. Because Thor 2 is getting released in November, and I think the Christmas feel would have been more natural at that point. But it's a minor distraction. Overall, though, the tone is surprisingly consistent with the other films. Sometimes when you switch to directors, it really feels like it's a breakaway. Normally, the way you compensate that is at least by having the same writers come over, but Shane Black also wrote this, so I have some problems with the direction they took. Obviously, there's some stuff I didn't like so much, but I am surprised at the tonal differences, tonal similarities between the films. They got the house set right, although sometimes it seems smaller than I imagined it. But they got the house scenes right. It feels like it's the same mansion that we've seen in the previous films. The office though at Stark Industries does it, but like there's little details like that that really help with a franchise. That's franchise consistency. That really works well when you're watching things. Everything feels the same. I hate it when there's like small differences, but you notice them in a film. They help ruin the overall feeling that this is everything is in continuity with everything else. If I were to pull out an example, the Resident Evil films. Perfect example there is the Umbrella Soldiers look different in every single film. They have different outfits. They're wearing black and they're kind of faceless. That's about it. That's the only the equipment changes, their weapons change. So you notice that a bit, and it doesn't feel like they're in continuity as much. That's one of the reasons that Star Wars always works so well, is that they had this great continuity in their locations and in the costumes. The stormtroopers wear the same outfit every time, and there was they got a good amount of that, but they could have gone a little bit more. But the big thing he got though was that element of humor. The Iron Man films have always been very humorous, and this one's actually probably the funniest out of them all. It's surprising how funny this film is. And what I mean by funny is, where does it find the humor? Not where you'd probably think. It finds the humor in Tony being a dick to children. Oh yeah, he outright just trashes this. He's got a little kid sidekick that he treats like crap, and it's hilarious. He even sees like another kid earlier in the film, and he's like, "Okay, not gonna lie, Christmas Story kid, you're freaking me out," because the kid looks like he's from the Christmas Story. It's surprisingly how funny. I guess that shows how cruel we all are, and the deep on the inside. But there's a lot of humor there. Of course, it's got the very similar humor to the other films as well, just like Tony, in that situational awkwardness of just how you'd expect a guy with this unusual abilities and this unusual equipment and his own little quirks. I think those like little quirk humor relationship moments were done a little bit better in the first two films. I guess that's showing where Favreau's strengths are compared to where Black's strengths are. But it was good, Downey Jr. on top of it as always, great performance. Ben Kingsley. I'll get into that in a bit, but the parts where he's supposed to be funny are hilarious. And I love this with Ben Kingsley. It's like he knows he's never going, he knows he's peaked. He's like, I did Gandhi. I'm happy with that. I've got I've been knighted. I'm not going to top that. And it's not like a depression, like, I'm never going to reach that again. No, he's like, it's cool, I've done it. So he doesn't care anymore. And not in a bad way, as in, he just goes and has fun with his roles. You know, you get some of those actors that they've done those legendary performances and they're always chasing them. Kingsley doesn't. If he's having fun, he's just there. He's going to enjoy himself. He's not going to let anything tear him down. And he showed that there. I mean, he still can do important stuff. Like, if he's going to pick a fun... He'll still do stuff like Shutter Island. He was even in Schindler's List, wasn't he? But it's... Regardless, it's nice to see that, though, in an actor that... they're like, you know, I've got my award, now, you know, I'm going to have fun with the rest of my career. And if I can take a role, be serious about it, but still... You know, he's not chasing the demons, shall we say. He's having fun. He's having fun in this movie. I'll get into more about the Mandarin in a bit. Also, I got a little kick out of it. Early in the film, we get to see super nerdy Guy Pearce, where basically they dress up Guy Pearce as being a complete, like, extremely nerdy type of guy. They did an okay job, I guess, with him. It's kind of hard to try to make, like, let's make Guy Pearce completely unattractive, like be the ultimate nerd. Like, he's even got like a spinal disability, so he's like a hunchback. He's hunchback Guy Pearce. Although they still don't do like the whole. It is mostly they put like a really bad wig on him, had him hunch over, and like put glasses on him. Like, look, he's horrible looking. He's pathetic. It's funny to see that early performance. I enjoyed it. Also, I got a little kick, and this is by my own stupidity. Well, not my own stupidity, but I got myself kind of into this one. The movie starts off with the song Blue, you know, da-boo-dee, da-boo-die, da-boo-dee, da-boo-die. Yeah, it's black and it starts up like that. And as the screen's still black, I'm like, really? This song? This is the song you're going to start Iron Man 3 with? Like, what is this? The early 2000s? And then it was literally, as I said that, boom. It comes up on the screen, 1999. I'm like, well, it is. And they have a nice little fun moment, poking fun of like the early 90s. Or not the early, very late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, they got some of the... it's not a very stylish period, but like, Favreau's there. He's wearing like... He's got like a mullet for some reason. I don't remember those being popular back then. But it's a nice little scene there, and actually it's nice because they talk about that in the first movie. They said, I met you at a conference in Bern with Jensen, and they actually show like the little quick moment where he met Jensen and kind of basically blew him off. But the weird thing is, it's supposed to be like a scientific conference, and it's New Year's Eve. What scientific conference is going on New Year's Eve? Seriously. And like they're still trying to do business and like actual conference type stuff when it's like 11:45. Who sets that up? I know you like to put yourself around the holidays, but you don't have to make that New Year's. You don't have... It loses track if you set that at New Year's. But despite that distraction, it was fun to see that little scene. It's nice to see that little moment where, we get the little Jensen cameo. It was good. And apparently, like, that's also a scene that leads into the end of the film with you hear about... There's two cuts of this movie. There's a specific Chinese cut and and the regular cut for the rest of the world. And what it does is it adds in like a little... Apparently, like a 4-minute scene at the end where there's a Chinese doctor and her assistant that are both played by major Chinese actors. And the doctor, I believe, he's in this earlier scene where he's a cardiologist. He's like, well, if I ever need a cardiologist, I'll call you. Hint, hint. Speaking of that, by the way, I've also gotten feedback from, or read reports about that. Apparently, the Chinese are not happy with this scene. Like, apparently it wasn't directed by Shane Black, and it was just kind of added in. And everyone in China is kind of going, yeah, that 4-minute scene they put in just for us was complete crap and felt completely out of place. Go figure. Nice to see a studio fall flat on its face when it tries to over pander to a particular demographic. Anyway, speaking of, well, not really speaking of, but moving on to special effects, they're fairly good. I get the feeling though that in previous films the suit was way more practical. Like for the most part, like if they were in full suit, they actually had a full Iron Man suit, probably more made out of plastic, but it was there. This it really feels CGI, and I think the way the suit moves is in this movie. They borrowed the idea that the suit almost can be controlled by Jarvis, and so it comes apart a lot easier. It's flying off of him more. He's jumping in and out of it a lot more. Even to the one part where he's buried underneath ground, and this is a minor spoiler, I guess. To this the glove detaches as he's passing out, comes back, grabs his hand, and like pulls him out of the rubble while he's underwater, like under its own control. And it just I don't know. I don't like it. It feels too much like the suit's maybe a little overpowered now. You didn't have to do that part. And it also added to the overall CGI-ness, overuse of CGI, I think. And then the suits didn't feel hard enough, I guess. And for an Iron Man movie, you want it to feel, like they're big, heavy things. And instead, it made them feel too light. That's one of the natural things that happens when you use CGI, is it has no weight because it's just pixels. And it's one of those things that we subtly can pick up as an audience. Also, since we're talking about Shane Black's direction, this film's certainly darker, and it also is more of a Tony Stark film. Some people have actually compared this bit to Batman Begins, and it is a little bit more Tony Stark as Batman. Not doing the whole crime-fighting thing, but he's investigating stuff. He's kind of being the ultimate detective in some scenes, and he's out of the suit a lot. We see a lot more action as Tony Stark, and they do help establish this a little bit. Like they show him when he's fooling around in his basement. He's got one of those wushu Chinese kung fu practice styles. It's basically the pole with the different arms sticking out of it. So they tell us, okay, yeah, Tony, in his meantime, he probably is paid for grandmaster martial artists to train him because he can afford to, so why not? But we see him out of his suit. We see him, he's stuck in Tennessee. He's floating around in Tennessee for a while in this movie. And by the way, that Tennessee, parts of it are completely believable, but I don't think the casting director has ever been to Tennessee. I think the way Shane Black wrote it, it feels like Tennessee, because in one scene he goes into the bar and there's the deputies, sheriff's deputies are just drinking right there at the bar, fully armed. I'm like, yep, that sounds like that looks like Tennessee, but not a single person has a southern accent. I've been to Tennessee, I've been to Nashville, I've been to Columbia. They have accents there. You couldn't hire a single extra with an accent, or even get an actor that could do a bit of a southern accent. We're really not going to do that. Anywhere else in the world, like if they went to England, if they were in, Wales, they would get nothing but people to make Welsh accents or Scottish accents if they're in Scotland. Or if it was taking place in France, they'd find that if there's a particular dialect or accent within France, any other time they would try to go for these type of regional flares. But if it happens in the American South, unless it's supposed to basically really, really stress that it's in the South, not a single person with the accent. I don't know. Minor gripe I had. But he's fiditzing around in like Tennessee for actually a good chunk of this movie. And it's fun to see him with like without the suit, him working, figuring out stuff. It helps really get a lot of the exposition out of the way, and it also still somewhat explains why the rest of the Marvel Universe isn't involved. And I'll get into that at the end. I'll save that for a little tie-in section. All right, from here on out, since I kind of I'm starting to get to about the plot, it's going to be spoilers, major spoilers. In fact, the first one I'm going to talk about here is the biggest spoiler of the movie. So if you don't want it spoiled, it does have my official recommendation. Go check it out. If you enjoyed the other Iron Man movies, you'll probably enjoy this one. Alright, spoiler warning was given. So in this film, it turns out that the Mandarin isn't really real, or at least Ben Kingsley's Mandarin is actually nothing more than a puppet. He's literally... What it is in the movie is that Guy Pearce's character, Killian, has basically created the Mandarin. His goal is he wants to control everything from the shadows. Yeah, he got stood up by Tony Stark in the opening scene, and he later on reveals that what he learned there is, unlike Stark, who relishes in the limelight, his place is kind of in anonymity, and there's a strength to anonymity. So I guess he's like the anti-Stark in that way. He's a true anti-Stark. He goes in the opposite direction of how Stark goes. And so his goal is to run things from without being seen. And so he sets up AIM for that purpose and creates his extremis soldiers, which I'll talk in just a second. And so to do this, his main goal is he was going to create the supply and demand for technology through the War on Terror. And he basically has created the Mandarin character as being the eponymous ultimate terrorist. And his main goal is he's going to get someone under his influence, the vice president, to become president so he can control the entire flow of the War on Terror and use it to increase his wealth. So the Mandarin that we all see on television is really, it turns out Tony Stark comes across him and he's an actor. He finally reveals that he's just like an actor that Killian is paying to play this role, and he's like a really drugged out actor. In fact, he goes like, it's like I'm a stage actor, but I was up on all these drugs, and they promised they'd cure you of the addiction. He's like, no, they promised me even more drugs. So that it's quite humorous because he switches. He's like basically like a drunken pothead. So that's what Sir Kingsley has decided to play. And I do at least like that, like, Tony immediately, like, upon seeing that this is in no way the Mandarin, like, assumes he's a double. He's like, okay, where's the real Mandarin? You're a double. Tell me where the real one is. There's at least smartness on him. At least they're not going for that whole, what? He tries to, he at least thinks he's figured out that, okay, this isn't the real guy, but he must be just, like, a body double. Which I guess he kind of is. In the end, the Killian character kind of does, like, he gets into a fist fight. They have the extremist stuff. By the way, I guess I should explain extremist. Tony doesn't actually get the extremist stuff. They use it as the bad guy MacGuffin, where it's basically the ability to completely rewrite your DNA so that if you like missing a limb, you can regrow the limb, but it's also, it like superheats up your body, like this gets crazy energy. That's where you see like the people with the red glow in the movies. And they're using these terrorist attacks by actually like giving these guys these injections, which are basically overdoses. And when you overdose on the extremists, it blows you up. Like your body just explodes. And so they're basically using unwitting suicide bombers to create these explosions and bombings throughout the country. No one can figure out what they are because the body that's blowing up, there's no bomb parts. It's the body itself just exploding. But that's what the extremist is in this movie. Tony never gets it. Pepper does, or Potts does. at the end, but he kind of says he can like fix it. Whatever. Uh, anyway, so that's how he kind of gets people under his sway. Once they've gotten this stuff down to where they can, like, most of the people that are working for him were like soldiers that were missing limbs, and just because he can grow their arm back, they're like, we should totally turn on our country, support this terrorist action. I don't know. I have a feeling there was a lot cut from that, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But you're not understanding at least the motivation of the people working for Killian. Like, you can kind of get Killian. Like, he's just manipulating the entire situation to make a shit ton of money. But the guys he's getting to work with under him, it's more questionable. But anyway, what I was originally talking about, at the end of the film, he's the guy that, like, you see fighting Iron Man in. Like, apparently this stuff not only makes your ability to grow, it can make you super strong and fast. Enough for you to legitimately fight somebody in a power armor suit. I kind of like that because it varies up the villains a bit from the previous two films where it's just another guy in a suit to where we're fighting Iron Man, in his suit versus a guy that's using an organic version. It's a super soldier he's basically made. To the point where he can breathe fire. He does that in this film. He can breathe fire. He can heat up his hands so much where he can like burn through the armor. You can cut off his arm. He can regrow it. But when he's fighting him, eventually he takes off his shirt and he's got like dragon tattoos. And after he gets really messed up, he kind of goes like, "I am the Mandarin." I think that's their throwaway line. I think they knew people would be like really pissed if they like completely made the Mandarin did not exist. So I think they tried to give a compromise there. They knew the audience would be really unhappy if there was no Mandarin, so they can now say that, well, yes, the Mandarin wasn't there. It's just Killian was the Mandarin. They pulled like a Ra's al Ghul from Batman, where Mandarin technically was in the movie. They did have a legit Mandarin pulling all the strings, and it's Killian. I guess some people are trying to now figure out, does that mean the terrorists in Iron Man 1 were under Killian's sway as well? Was that like how he started off early? Was he was funding these little groups and those guys happened to be part of them? Like, was he behind this kind of from the get-go? That's something for the fans to decide, and probably something for when the film gets to DVD and we have those deleted scenes. But yeah, that's the Mandarin ideal. That's a bit of a big. That's going to divide people. Some people are going to be really pissed. And I personally would have been a lot happier with Ben Kingsley as like the Mandarin that we see, like in the trailers. You could have made it where he was still under the sway or being pulled by Killian. I think you could have done that. I was hoping actually that was going to be the case, at least with AIM. Again, I'm saving that for the overall universe. He also blows up the armor at the end. Like, he kind of gets rid of his armor. He says, it's holding me. It doesn't say it's holding him back. It's vague because they know they're gonna have to have Iron Man back for Avengers 2. But this is the last movie Downey Jr. is contracted for, so they basically set this up as if there are no more standalone Iron Man films, then this is the proper ending for the series, because I don't think you can you have to wait till like a complete reboot. You can't recast Iron Man and keep it in the same universe. Downey Jr. is too much of the role. I think he'll be back for Avengers 2 at least, though. But where he gets the surgery to fix his heart, which, I mean, makes sense. It's the 21st century. We should be able to get shrapnel out of a heart. Hell, if it's really that bad, we can replace the heart. Iron Man was written back in the day when that was a little bit more risky. But at the end, he kind of like acknowledges that he's building these suits as kind of a distraction from from his post-traumatic stress from almost dying in the Avengers. So the suits that survive at the end, he kind of like detonates as like a fireworks show. Gets the surgery so he doesn't have to have the arc reactor in his chest anymore. In fact, at the end, he kind of chucks it into the ocean and the remains of his house. I'm assuming he has like probably about 15 other houses. I mean, the guy's a multi-billionaire. It kind of feels bad because you want him to still be Iron Man. I mean, everyone's just going, I bet that lasted for about a day, and then like the next day he started tinkering and building a new suit. All he has to do is keep the reactor now into the suit instead of the one on his chest. So he's still, I guess, Iron Man. I guess that's how that'll work. Let's see here. Oh, yeah. But I've got notes this time. Better AIM reference. Yeah. When they come up with AIM, it's Killian kind of, he comes up with the background. In the comics, AIM is actually an offshoot of Hydra. And I was hoping that AIM wasn't going to be a center role, but it was going to be like, it's obviously associated with bad guys, and it's doing something with the Mandarin, and maybe the Mandarin is more of a side project, and you get the sense that AIM's up to some risk. Like, that's what I was hoping they were going to do, is that AIM was not directly involved, not the main villain. I was kind of hoping they were setting that up for Captain America 2, so that AIM would be the main villain there, but they get a little bit of an introduction here where they're having some shady deals with the Mandarin, but no, in fact they're the main villain here, because Killian's the main villain. Killian found an AIM and created it, and I was hoping, in the comics they're an offshoot of Hydra, which is why they always feel more of a Captain America villain, but they're also kind of they're mainly known by their minions in the comics, and in their minions, they basically wear yellow radiation suits. Some people call them the beekeeper suits. There's stereotypical radiation suits. And a lot of people feel, especially on the internet, feel they really should have worked in some sort of reference. And you know what? They could have at a couple points. Well, first off, it's yellow. Yellow's the color they wear. They could have, at some point, they have guards and soldiers. The guards wear, black suits. The soldiers kind of just wear standard mercenary-esque suits. A little bit of yellow on any of those outfits could have been a nice little nod, but they also could have just done 2 scenes where they could have easily got the little radiation suits, and I don't think anybody would have questioned why they would have had them. One is when they're showing the extremist tests at first. They could have done that so that all the people involved, the scientists that were injecting the people, they could have got something weird might happen with these guys. I mean, they're going to glow red and they might explode. So the scene right there, if they were just wearing the yellow hazmat suits, good. There's a little wink and a nod, and it makes sense for that scene. There is also at the end when they're on the boats, when Tony Stark and Rhodes first show up there. There's guys walking around. A couple of them have flamethrowers, which don't come into play later on. But there's a couple of the mercenaries walking around there with flamethrowers. They could have easily had those guys wearing the hazmat suit, and if they're walking around with a flamethrower, you don't question why they might have a hazmat suit on too. Because obviously they were planning where they're going to roast the president alive in the in the Iron Patriot armor. That would have been quite decisive. That would have been dark if they did that. We're getting dark territory there. But if they just had a couple of those guys in the suits or something vaguely reminiscent of the suits, could have worked. Maybe the AIM will we still don't know how this is all taking place time-wise with the other films. If this is another case where Captain America movie is taking place right at the same time or a week after, you could still maybe bring AIM in and maybe reveal a little bit more oh well, Killian's original backers were an old ex-Nazi who was actually part of Hydra. Who knows? AIM might still show up, or perhaps MODOK will appear in Captain America movie, where it's Killian's gone, but he left behind. He also had a supercomputer project, and the computer is now maybe running the Winter Soldier. I could actually see that happening, but only because I feel AIM is more of a Captain America villain. Plus, I kind of want to see these mini crossover points where it's not everyone has to share the same build up to the Avengers. but like you can share like a villain. Like two movies must have like a villain related. So the idea of having AIM in both this Captain America movie and in or Captain America and Iron Man, and like nobody else. That's cool. I'd have liked that. Let's see. Not too much left to talk about. The last point I have is just you can easily tell a lot was cut out of this movie. I have no idea how long the original running time for this movie is, but I have a feeling it was a lot. There's several speeches that the Mandarin gives in the trailer, which you could tell were cut out of this movie. That whole line, like, Rule 1, there is no heroes. We don't hear that in there. Or you can kind of see where they might have had that line, like after they take out Tony Stark, or they attack him. You could have easily, like, the Mandarin's making these broadcasts. We only see like 2 or 3 of them. So the idea that there was more cut out of this, almost certainly. And I know I've seen production stills where they showed like AIM headquarters. There was an office complex, and they had AIM there, and there's the film crew set up. So there was something filmed there that we still don't know about, and who knows how much else was cut out from this film to get it, probably for pacing, I'm assuming, because the film is long already. So I have a feeling there was a lot cut out of this film, and it might lead to some plot holes. I have a feeling there's some stuff there's plot holes that are actually probably covered in some of those cut scenes. So when this comes to DVD, that's certainly going to be our Blu-ray, or both, I should say. That's going to be something to check out. Is the scenes that they cut and see how they fit with the narrative. Because I'm one of those guys where I'll still take cut scenes at canon value as long as they don't contradict anything else. Like, as long as it's like, this still seems like this would have flowed and happened, I'm fine with that. Now, how this ties into the overall Marvel Universe is certainly the first thing people are asking with this is, well, why does it just call in the Avengers? And I must say, not only does the film outright address that, but the way the plot is set up and how it rolls is you don't have a point where you would see why he would try to assemble the Avengers, because really, for the most part, this is just like a terrorist doing bombings. There's not a whole lot the Avengers are going to do. Thor, there's a guy that's causing a couple of bombings on the planet. We need you to come. What the fuck's Thor going to do? Same thing with Captain America. Even Tony Stark only has a passing interest in the Mandarin situation until it becomes personal. It becomes personal when Happy Hogan gets blown up because he's following around one of the guys from AIM, because he gets suspicious of them. He's really just paranoid. But that's like the main reason. It's like a personal little issue because one of his best friends gets almost killed in a Mandarin attack, and he's hospitalized for like the rest of the movie. That's it. That's the reason. So even Tony only had like a passing moment where he goes, "Oh, like he's talking with Rhodes. He's like, "Hey, what do you know about this Mandarin situation on the news?" He's like, "You keep out of it." What Rhodes says is basically after the New York invasion, the government feels that it has to show that it's still capable of like protecting the country, so they don't want to call in any superheroes or even S.H.I.E.L.D. to handle this problem, because they want to be able to show the government can still protect you. And even Tony's just like, whatever. He's only intrigued because they can't find like the bomb bits. Like, that's the only kind of reason he has like a bit of a passing interest in there, is when he finds out that there's no evidence of actual bomb. So he's thinking of that as more of a technical inquiry. And the way the rest of the movie flows, there's no point where he would actually naturally call in anyone. He kind of calls out the Mandarin after that attack. And then they almost immediately show up with those attack helicopters. Like, that's the next scene. Like 20-30 minutes after he like issues this challenge. Apparently, maybe you could argue that was planned, but even that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you think about it. Like they get the idea that they actually kind of want Tony to work on the Extremis project for it's not 100% good, and based on like a couple of notes Tony made when he was drunk, 13 years ago, he almost solved the entire problem. So they kind of want him to work on the project. And you could argue that this attack and stuff is trying to force him to get involved and maybe team up, go to AIM, work with them to actually solve their problem that they're creating. But the only reason he issues this challenge was because Happy Hogan gets hurt, and the only reason Happy Hogan it's not like they attacked Happy Hogan. They bombed the Chinese theater in LA, and he was following around one of the guys from AIM. Again, maybe there's something a little bit more in cut scenes that lead us to that, but you're kind of wondering how did they just have these helicopters on standby, and as soon as he issued the threat, they're like, oh sweet, we can jump to this point in the plan. Might be a slight plot hole there. But after that, then he flies out. People think he's dead. The suit automatically flew him out to Tennessee, and when he's out there, he decides to do his own little investigation thing. He's not fighting the villains per se, and he's trying to keep it off the grid as much as possible. And then when it does get heavy, it gets heavy very fast. So you don't see a point where they would call it in. I do agree that maybe something more of a S.H.I.E.L.D. reference should have been put in there. There is a scene where he's putting he's doing his investigation, he's getting data. He says I want to pull everything from the FBI, CIA, and S.H.I.E.L.D. databases on this. That's the only reference to S.H.I.E.L.D. I think at the very least, they do show the aftermath of that attack on his house. Just to have a couple of guys there with S.H.I.E.L.D. on their jackets would have been enough for, I think, at least somewhat more of a reference to go, okay, now S.H.I.E.L.D. is starting to get involved. Something little like that would have been fine. I think for the overall continuity. I have a feeling Shane Black was not very happy having to share, having to be concerned about these other movies. He's not a director or individual that's used to working in these big franchises. The only one he's really had experience with is Lethal Weapon, something that he has created himself. So I have a feeling he didn't like that element and kept away from it as much as possible. And that's the reason why we don't see too much from outside of just Iron Man. However, they did at least at the end, the after credit scenes, which I think a lot of people have already talked about, are basically he's narrating throughout this entire film. He's got his own little narration over scenes. And at the end of the movie, it reveals that he's just been kind of going on this to Bruce Banner. Or Mark Ruffalo is back as Banner. It's just, and Ruffalo is just already passed out. He was bored from Tony's ramblings. And he's like, Tony, I'm not that kind of doctor. Which is a nice little continuity nod, and does kind of pick off where the Avengers were, hinting that wherever Banner is, Stark knows where he's at. In fact, I'm kind of suspicious when it comes to the future if when the Avengers 2 starts, when they have to get Stark and Banner together, that they're already going to be together. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised since Potts gets infected with the Extremis if their opening scene is them curing her, going, oh, thank God I called you in here, Banner. He's like, yeah, no problem. And fix it, and then they get the little call. It's Fury. He's assembling the team. So I would not actually be surprised if that's where the Avengers 2 picks up with those two either working together already. Because he did kind of imply that he would, under the radar, possibly, he would, pull in Banner to work with him. So it's quite clear that those two are, hanging out. And I think it also maybe implies that Tony moved from East Coast to West Coast. Or from West Coast to East Coast. I think I've already talked about my ideals for what I'm hoping for to see AIM in the Captain America: Winter Soldier. I kind of like the idea that maybe the Winter Soldier is another AIM project. And again, if this works like the first one did, where the first in Phase 1 of Marvel's movies, Iron Man 2, Thor, and the end stuff of Captain America all took place in the same week. Oh, and the Incredible Hulk. Basically, everything out of, I think how the plot line goes is basically Iron Man happens first, then it's about a year, and then it's like Iron Man 2, Hulk, Thor, and the de-icing of Captain America all take place in the exact same week, and they're all overlapping. So possibly the ideal that the Winter Soldier thing is like directly related to the fallout from this. Like we just got the word, this organization AIM is now suspected to be linked with terrorists. Yeah, we need you to check this out. And then I don't know. That'd be a cool way, I think, to link the movies. I doubt this is going to have much effect on Thor, because Thor, especially the new one, looks like it's going to be way out there. Though we are supposed to get an Ant-Man movie and Guardians of the Galaxy. Those two will be interesting because we have no idea of, we have no previous movie relations with these guys. It's hard to tell how they're coming in with based on the comics, because they take this stuff piecemeal. Like from what I heard, a couple people complain like some of the minor background characters have names that are apparently names of characters from Marvel continuity, and basically they just kind of threw them on there for like little nods, I guess. So that's my opinion of the movie. It's go see it. I think I rambled on enough. I don't need to talk about trailers because for the most part they're the same trailers you see every time. I'm going to probably go catch The Great Gatsby next week because it looks like an interesting movie. Although, we'll see how the soundtrack goes. It might be fun, but I have a feeling if the soundtrack is a little too hip-hop-ish, it's going to be one of those films that it's great at the time, but then you look at it like 5-6 years later and you're like, wow, this is dated poorly. I'll save that for when I see the movie. But that looks like a fun movie. Then we got Star Trek. So we got all that coming up. Looks to be fun. Looks to be enjoyable. Yeah, that's about it. It's the summer. It's time for me to waste a whole lot of money on seeing movies. Goodbye, wallet. Signing off, guys. Catch you next time.